So fall of 2024 is almost here, and so every fall I really enjoy creating fall themed artworks and fall themed tutorials. And so I just recently finished this cute pumpkin fall 3D artwork, and so this video is going to be an artwork breakdown showing you how I made this artwork. So it's not going to be a step-by-step tutorial. However, if you want to create something similar, then you could definitely try doing that by using the tips and tricks and kind of the process of how I made it. And if you'd like to check out the final renders, I will have a link in the description to the artwork on my ArtStation profile. And if you'd like to help support the channel and purchase the artwork project files, you can also get that with the links in the description on my Gumroad store and Patreon page, and you can look into the Blender file and see how I created the materials and see how I did the lighting and the scene setup, or you could also use the 3D model in your projects if you wanted to. And you can also check out my fall and autumn themed tutorial playlist if you want to learn how to create some fall and autumn themed artworks, like creating some pumpkins, also an apple pie and a Thanksgiving turkey, and some more fall themed artworks. So then I started off by making the pumpkin, and to make the pumpkin you can just add a UV sphere, and I scaled the UV sphere down to like a 0.2 to make it a better size, and then just applied the scale. And then you can go into edit mode, and you can click here to turn on the proportional editing, and you can like select the top of the sphere, and you can move it down on the Z-axis to kind of make that inside there of the pumpkin, and also do the same thing here for the bottom. And then how I made the little stripes there, or the pattern of the pumpkin, is I held down the Alt key and selected that top loop there, and then you can hold down the Shift and Alt key and select that loop there, and that loop there, and that loop there, so it's a cross shape, and then hold down the Shift and Alt key and select all the loops which are in the center. Then you can just scale the loops down, and you can scroll your mouse wheel to change the size of the proportional editing, and you can just kind of make that smaller like that. And then what you can do is press Ctrl B to add a bevel to your selection, just to kind of add a really small bevel there to sharpen that up. I'll go back to solid view, shade it smooth, and then you can press Ctrl 2 to add a subdivision surface with 2 levels. I also might want to like select the top of the pumpkin and kind of scale it up a bit, maybe even select the loop here in the middle and kind of scale that up a little bit. So then I also want to create a stem on the top of the pumpkin. So to do that, I went to the add menu and I added a circle. So in edit mode, I'm just going to scale the circle way down, and then I can just go to top view, and you can just select 2 of these here. So I'll select these 2, then you can skip 2 and then select 2 more, and then skip 2, and just continue to do that all the way down. So now you can see I've selected a pattern with 2, and then I've skipped 2 and then selected 2 more. So you can now scale all these down, and I'm just going to scale that down to make kind of like a star or a gear shape. So now you can go to side view, and you can extrude it and then kind of scale it down a bit, and extrude up again and scale it down. You can also start to rotate it to kind of make that pumpkin stem there. And then you can add a subdivision surface modifier and shade it smooth, and you can see that's now looking like a pumpkin stem. You can also extrude this out and then scale it down a bit and then fill the faces there. And you can see here on the very bottom of the stem, I also selected this loop and kind of scale it up and extruded it down to make those kind of lumpy pieces right there. And then I wanted to add a cute face to the pumpkin, so what I did is I added a circle, and I went into edit mode and kind of scale it way down, and you can go into edit mode and you can rotate this by 90 degrees and scale it up so it's a bit longer, and this is going to be the eye, and you can also press the F key to fill a face there. Then you can hit the I key to inset, and you can inset these faces here just to add a lot more detail. So once you've added a lot more detail, you can go back to object mode, and you can go here to the modifiers, and you can first add the mirror modifier, and then go into edit mode and scale the eye down and move the eye over so that there are 2 eyes. Then after that, you can add a shrink wrap modifier, and you can choose here on the target object, and you can choose the pumpkin. And this way you can see it's going to shrink wrap to the object. And then you can also drag this offset here and just bring the offset up so that those eyes are kind of popping out there. Then to give it some thickness, you can also add a solidify modifier after that so that it makes it solid. And you can just drag the solidify thickness so it goes back there inside the pumpkin. And then finally, just to make it a bit more smooth, you can add the subdivision surface modifier at the very end of the modifier stack so that it's nice and smooth. And then to add the little highlight on the eyes, you can duplicate the mesh. And on the shrink wrap settings, you can delete the sphere, and then for the shrink wrap here, you can choose to shrink wrap it onto the other object. You can go into edit mode, and you can just kind of scale it down to make it a circle shape, and you can kind of move it over here, kind of rotate it, and then of course you'll need to turn the thickness down and also change the offset, so you can kind of push the offset down like that, and that way it creates those little highlights for the eyes. And then for the eyebrows and the mouth, I basically did the same exact thing. So you can see here's the object here. So it's basically just a plane, which I extruded out and added a loop cut there. But then I added the same modifiers so that you can kind of rotate the mesh and move the mesh around. And that's going to change where the eyebrow is. And then I also did the same thing for the mouth object. Now the candle modeling was really quite simple. You can basically just add a cylinder and scale it to the correct shape. And then if you select the edges of the cylinder, you can add a bevel around that just to make it smoother. And then I just insetted these faces and scaled them down. And then for the wick here of the candle, that's really easy. You can just add another cylinder and extrude it up there, kind of rotate it, and then add a little bevel on the top. And then for the candle flame, this is really easy. Again, you can just add another cylinder and you can extrude the cylinder up and scale it down and kind of have it come to a point. And the acorns were pretty easy to model as well. You can again just add a cylinder, you can kind of scale it down so the acorn comes to a point there, and then you can add another cylinder to create the acorn top or the acorn hat and just scale that down and then make that little point there. So it was now time to set up some lighting so that I could do the materials. So for the lighting, I went over here to the world properties and I added this autumn ground 1K HDRI from polyhaven.com, and I really like this HDRI for fall scenes because it's a nice outdoor scene, but then it also has all those orange colors of the fall leaves. And then I also added a few different lights here, so I just added some area lights kind of on the background just to kind of give it a bit of a rim light. So you can see there was those bright areas, whereas before if I hide this, it just kind of looks darker there on the back of the pumpkin. It doesn't look that nice, but you can see by adding those rim lights there, add some little light reflections there, and that looks quite nice. But then I didn't want to see the HDRI in the background, so here on the render properties, you can go to the film tab and just check mark the transparent button. However, I did want to add a bit of a shadow underneath the pumpkin, and then I wanted to add a color in the compositor. So what I did is just added a plane and I scaled the plane way up. And then if you go into edit mode, you can bring the back of the plane back and then you can extrude it up. And then to add kind of a backdrop, you can select this edge here. You can press Ctrl B to add a bevel and scroll your mouse wheel so there are lots of cuts there just to add a nice backdrop and then shade it smooth. Now if I go into the camera view and go into rendered mode, you can see it's actually going to kind of blow out the image because it's so bright. So I added a material to this, and on the base color, I just made it kind of like an orangey color and then made it very dark. So it's kind of a brownish color, and then also turned the roughness up to 1. However, you can see there's still kind of like some light parts here, and I only wanted it to catch the shadows, but I wanted most of the background to just be kind of a subtle brown color. So what you can do is select the backdrop, and you can go here to the object data properties, and you can go here to the visibility tab, and then you can choose shadow catcher. So this way it's going to be fully transparent. You can see here's the object, but it's transparent, but it's just going to catch the shadows which are going on it. And then I could add a background color in the compositor. So most of the materials in the scene were all procedural. So let's go through the materials. So for the eyebrows and the eyes, that was just a black color and I made it kind of shiny. Then here for the highlights, this was also just a very bright color, and then I turned the roughness down. And then the acorns had some really simple materials, just kind of these two brown colors, and I made them kind of shiny to give them that cartoon stylized look. Now for the candle material, I added a noise texture and I used the object coordinates, and I turned up the scale and the detail to make it kind of rough. And then I put that into the bump to give a little bit of bump to the candles. And finally, I put the bump normal into the normal of the shader. Then for the base color, I kind of made it this tannish color so that it kind of looks like candle wax, and then I turned down the roughness a bit. But then to really make it look like candle wax, I turned up the subsurface. So if the subsurface weight is turned all the way down, you can see it just really doesn't look like candle wax. It doesn't have that soft waxy feel to it, but by turning up the subsurface weight, it's going to allow light to go through the material, so that looks a lot more like candle wax. Now for the flame material, what I did is added a gradient texture, but then I used this mapping node here and I rotate it around on the y-axis so that the gradient is going up and down. So it's darker down here and lighter up here. Then I put that through a color ramp and I made the bottom of it more red and I made the top of it more yellow. And then finally I put that into an emission shader and I turned the strength up to 5, and that way we have these nice bright candles. Now I wanted to create kind of a stylized pumpkin material. I didn't want it to look super realistic, realistic, but I also wanted to add some details. So what I did is I added this Voronoi texture and I used the object coordinates. Then I added a color ramp to make it really contrasty, and then I finally mixed that into a mix color. Now I also wanted to add a bit of a gradient to kind of give it a nice stylized look. So for this I added a gradient, and then I also rotated it over by 90 degrees on the y-axis, so it's black down here and then white up here. And then you can also drag the location X around if the gradient isn't at the correct spot. Then I put that through a mix color, and I made the two different colors for the gradient. So I made kind of this darker red and then kind of this lighter orange. And then finally I mixed that in with the mix color. So how I added the dots on top of the color is I put this mix here, which is the gradient. I put that into color B, and then I put the color ramp here, which is the Voronoi dots, into the factor. So now here on color A, that is going to be the color there of the dots. So I just made it kind of like a brownish reddish color, and then finally put that into the base color. I also turned the roughness down just a little bit to make it a bit more shiny, and then to make it look a bit more soft and make light go through the material, I turned up the subsurface weight just a little bit to a 0.2. Now for the stem material, I did just want to add a little bit of color variation. So what I did is I added this ambient occlusion here so that kind of the creases and crevices are a bit darker, and then I put that through a color ramp, so you can see some of these areas are a bit darker here, but then kind of the parts which are popping out are a bit lighter. So I chose like a brown color and a black color and put that into this principled shader. Now because this was a fall autumn scene, I wanted to put in some fall leaves on the ground. So what I decided to do first is to just try modeling some leaves. So here's the leaf that I modeled. So you can see this is actually like a 3D mesh, and I gave it like a solidify modifier to give it some thickness, but I didn't really like how it was turning out. I didn't really like the shape, and I didn't really like how the edges were kind of smooth and round, and it also was just way too thick. So what I decided to do instead is to download this free image from Pixabay of these fall leaves. I'll have a link in the description if you want to check it out. So what I did is went to the add menu, and I went here to image and added a mesh plane. Then what you can do is you can go into edit mode of the mesh plane, you can hit the K button for the knife tool, and you can just click along the mesh plane and you can just cut out the leaves. So once you cut out a leaf, then you can select all the faces which are controlling the leaf. You can press the P button and you can separate by selection. So after cutting out the leaves, I just dropped the leaves around and I kind of gave them some random rotations. So it was now time to do the compositing. So I went here to the compositing layout and I just split the window here, and I made this side the 3D viewport, and then I made this side over here the compositing nodes. And then I wanted to preview the compositing nodes in the viewport. So if you scroll right over here and click on this drop down, you can change the compositor to always, and that way it's actually going to preview the finished compositing here in the viewport. So I started out by just taking the render layers and adding a glare to it, and I set the glare type to bloom. And then I also just turned down the threshold, so there's a little bit of glare here on the top, but most of the glare is coming here from the bright flames. Then I wanted to add a background, so I just added this alpha over here, and I put the glare into the bottom one. And then here on the top image, I just made it kind of this fall color, so kind of this dark reddish brown. Then I also wanted to add a subtle vignette, which is kind of that darkness around the image. So I added a box mask, and then I put that through a blur so that it blurs the box mask. Then I mixed it in with an alpha over, so you can put the blur image into the top one, and then the alpha over, which is the final compositing, that can go into the bottom one. So now the top one here, that is going to be the color of the vignette. So you can make it lots of different colors, whatever color you like, but usually for a vignette, I think turning it to black looks really nice. So there's just a subtle little blackness around the image, so it kind of brings your eyes into the center of the scene. So that was it for the compositing. And here's the finished render of the cute pumpkin character. But then I also thought it would be cool to create some different variations of this artwork with different colors. So I just duplicated the Blender file, and then I just changed the colors of the materials. And I also changed the color of the lights. So I made a pink version, so I kind of changed the gradients. There's like some blue here and then kind of some pink. But then I also just did some color correction, so I added an RGB curves to the texture there of the leaves to make it kind of some blue colors and some pink colors. I also changed the color there of the acorns, and then also changed the light color. Then I also decided to make a red version, so I think the red version is really cool. Again, just kind of changing the colors to make it red, also making some really red candles. And then I also wanted to do kind of like a yellowish one, so I kind of added the gradient so it's kind of more orange here on the bottom, and then kind of had like yellow on the top. Then I also did kind of more of an abstract blue one, and this one kind of looks a little bit more creepy and abstract, but I definitely like how that looks. Maybe it's more of like a nighttime scene. I also added some cool like magical blue candles, and then I also did kind of like a purplish one, and I do like how this looks. And then I also decided to do a metallic one. So for this one, I changed the colors a little bit to make them more kind of reddish, but then I turned all the metallic values up to 1. These leaves look metallic, and the pumpkin and everything looks really metallic and shiny. And then I did a green one, and I really like how this one looks. I kind of feel like this one has an early fall vibes because everything hasn't turned super red yet, so the pumpkin is still a bit green, so the pumpkin is still ripening. And actually just a few days ago when I was outside, I saw a green acorn, so the acorn hadn't quite turned brown yet. So I do believe the acorns are green before they kind of turn brown, and also before pumpkins ripen, they're a bit of a green color. So here's all the color variations, and I'll just hide my webcam so I'm not in the way. So let me know which one you like the best. I do think I like the orange one, the classic orange one, the best up here in this corner, but also I really do like the green one. That looks really cool as well. And also I really do like this blue one. It looks quite nice as well, but I think my two favorite ones are this orange one and the green one. So I hope you got something out of this video, and thank you so much for watching. And again, if you'd like to check out the final renders, I'll have a link in the description to the artwork on my ArtStation profile. And if you'd like to purchase the artwork files, I'll have them up for sale on my Gumroad store and Patreon page. You can purchase the artwork files to use as study material to kind of look into the materials and see how I created them, or to see how I did the lighting, or even to use the 3D models in your projects. So I hope you enjoyed this video, thank you for watching, and happy fall.